last and final domain here, and this is one I think to me, I think personally, I think a lot of organizations sort of leave out. They sort of forget this piece, and this is why I put it in here. And that is the domain seven, which is leadership continuity and governance maturity. So, and the question must be asked: does governance get better, or does it just reset every year? And, I hear this probably over and over and over again. It seems like every association you hear this common question, like, we got the same people that serve on the board every year. We keep going back to the same people, or, we got the same committee members, we got the same chairs. Like, we sit around, our nominating committee sits around every year and we sit there and figure out, well, who wants to be on the board? I mean, it's like, how many times you hear this, Ed, in boards? Like we got the same people, we can't find anybody. We got 300 people that come to our conference this year, but how come we only get like two people that want to nominate for the board? It's like, you just hear it. It just seems like a thing. Like, and so, that's the question you must ask in your organization. Is your governance getting better? Or is it just the same thing over and over again? Are you getting the same kind of people, the same, you know, we used to use this term and we used to see this in a lot of boards, especially like in the 90s and in the early 2000s. We called it the boards that had the PMS syndrome, which no offense to any of us now, because I'm starting to become part of that PMS syndrome, but it was boards that have suffer from PMS. It was the pale, male, and stale. It's just a bunch of old white men that like running these boards. Because it was. I mean, you look around, you're like, God, is there anybody that's not old and white here on these boards? Again, I can fall in that category now because I'm starting to fall in that older category. But again, it's that whole notion of leadership continuity and governance. Like, are you maturing? Are you getting better? Are you cycling through? So again, when do you know it's not working? Well, again, it's comments like that board CEO partnership. Again, if you know, you know. It's this is not one of those. This is an obvious thing. When you have a problem when you're sitting in that nominating committee meeting and everybody's like just scratching their heads, like, okay, we got three open spots, guys. Who's it gonna be? And that one Joe's like, well, I don't know. I'll call Sally again. I mean, she didn't want to do it last year, but I'll call her again. Maybe see if she wants to do it this year. Well, what about Jane? Well, Jane's chairing conference committee for, she's been chair of the past 4 years, but we don't have anybody to take over for Jane on conference committee. So I hate to ask her to run for the board because then who's going to take over for her for conference then? Well, they run through that cycle. Like, I don't even want to take somebody who's chairing a committee away because then who's going to take over for her? So you get that cycle of like, when do you have people to replace the people that are doing committee chairs? So it's like you don't have that, there's not that cycle, that sustainability. Um, so anyway, this is again one of those areas where I think from organizations that I think we really struggle with is that developing that leadership pipeline, that sustainability model. Are we truly using, kind of going back to that other thing, like, are we using our immediate past presidents the way we could be? Those past presidents that are out there that are still willing to be engaged and be involved, are we using them? So, again, it's that, are we nurturing our future leaders, and are we taking advantage, or not taking advantage necessarily, you shouldn't use that word, but are we capitalizing on those who still have something left to give? And are we using that in any way, shape, or form? So,
Jim, I got two thoughts on this. My thought number one, leaning back to the previous domain, six, the culture
mm-hmm,
piece. It
mm-hmm,
seems to me that if you have a really good culture, then this is going to be less of a problem.
yeah,
The other thing that
that's
I'm wondering,
true.
just for your thoughts on, um, again, we're having this discussion about this morning with the CEO group, and where there's a problem sometimes where maybe the vice president gets pushed out,
Mm-hmm,
and so somebody else becomes the president the next year. Do you have any
right.
thoughts on the way boards are set up with the ascension process, whether
Oh gosh, do I?
too long of an ascension process that's like a 7-year ascension process, or too short of an ascension process because I'm wondering, and what your thoughts are, should there
Mhm.
be a a president-elect position in between the president and the vice president position?
Mm, mm. Honestly, we tried something out with the organization that I worked with a few years back. Unfortunately, I had left to go work for the chamber before I could see it like fully scaled out. I'd love to go back with them and check it out and see how they're working it now. But um, I think it will work really well for them. But basically, what they did is they created their president. They created it where their president serves a 2-year term. And at first, they were kind of a little bit leery, like, I don't know, that seems like a long time. But the more that we talked about it, I was like, well, here's kind of the thought. And as the committee, the nominating or the board, this advisor group that they had was kind of looking into it. It was like, okay, they're like, think through this. Imagine you're the president elect and you're going to be coming into this role as president, right? And so during your year as president-elect would be when the organization would go through its strategic planning process. And so as you're going through this, we would go through the strategic planning process. You would develop your 2-year strategic plan. And so then basically when you become president for your 2-year term, your strategic plan would be a 2-year plan. We would limit it to 2 years, just a very finite look, knowing just how things change and change so rapidly and so quickly. I mean, holy cow, like 6 months ago, we weren't even creating like really cool graphics on ChatGPT. Now, Chat is making some of the most amazing graphics like ever. So, I
Yeah,
mean, like things are just evolving so fast. So it's like, look, do we really need a 5-year strategic plan? No. We can do a 2-year strategic plan. Boom. Let's make some really big monumental things happen in 2 years, just real quick things. Anyway, long story short, it was like president-elect for 1 year, 2-year president term, and then immediate past president and out. So it made them serve a little bit longer, but you think about it, and I don't know, it always seems so frustrating to me anytime a president was on board, it's like they become president, and it's like it takes them, 100 days to kind of get up to speed, and then by the time they're up to speed, it seems like, oh my gosh, you're leaving now. Like it seems like you never really. How do you possibly get that much momentum built up to actually really accomplish anything? So it's almost like you need 2 years, but I get it when you hear like some young people going like, oh my gosh, that's 7 years. Like that's a long time. I may not even be in this profession for 7 years. But
yeah.
so I don't know. I mean, there's that give and take of, you know, is serving on the board for 7 years really realistic? And maybe it's not. And maybe we don't need, maybe have a shorter period of time as a director, knowing that like we're just going to identify really good people who are just very talented. And maybe they don't need to be on the board as a director for, 3-year terms and then be treasurer, maybe you just, maybe you get somebody who's on the board for 1 year, 3-year term and like, man, they're really good. We need to move them up to president like now because they're just talented and they do their 5 years and they're out. Like,
Gotcha.
I don't know. And that's just one of my random thoughts. But I do think there needs to be more time spent being in that role, though, as president. You know what I mean? It just seems like
Cool.
so. I'm just
Okay.
gonna
Our
I'm gonna stop my sharing here because that is
Garcia, you're
that is
from.
my
Okay. Okay. Very good. Hey, before